Thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, Azkia from Biznomics Studio. This is the first in the series of our exclusive discussions that aim and focus on educating viewers whilst giving perspective. On this podcast, we will explore energy transition and what it specifically means for the oil and gas industry. To start off the segment on the oil and gas sector, given its vital role in the economy, we invited expert Mr. Charles to share his experience in this field. Mr. Charles has over 30 years of experience in the oil and gas upstream sector. He joined the oil and gas industry in 1969 as an engineer with Halliburton and retired as vice president for the Asian Pacific region in 2008. Having worked in the upstream sector in UK, US, Norway, India, Singapore, Canada, and South America, he stepped down from his position in 2008. Thereafter, he joined Haley's Energy Services Sri Lanka as the CEO in 2009, where he was responsible for all oil and gas activities on the island. Thank you very much for joining me today. Let's start off by an introduction on your journey, work experience at Halliburton.
Okay, right. Well, I went to the UK in 65, I think, quite way before you all were born, and finished my studies. And then my first major job, I did small job, but major job was at Halliburton. Halliburton is the US. At that time, they were the largest oil field services contractor in the world. Right now, they are number 2. They were number 1. Now it's number J. So having joined them as a junior engineer, working first on the drawing boards, and then I started going to the field, and then I liked working offshore on the oil rigs. So that's where I cut my teeth. And first in Scotland, in Aberdeen, was my first sessions. And then from there onwards, I started moving around the world. Well, that's the way the oil industry works anyway. Every 4 years, they'll move to a different country. So it was great because you're experienced in different countries. But at the same time, the oil and gas world is changing all the time, mainly through technology. Yeah. So in the very old days, it was rigs that were built in wooden structures on land only. But now we got rigs that are offshore in 1,000 meters of water, and now we got floating rigs that are in 2,000, 3,000 meters of water. So it has moved on quite a bit. So, and fossil fuels is to me it's sort of the main artery of the industry. Anywhere in the world, without fossil fuels, we won't be here. But the green side is catching up, oil or gas, and bringing it out, cleaning it, producing it, and then pumping it down a pipeline to refineries or wherever. Yeah. So Haley's the big company here. Took me into, and I started the division for oil and gas in Sri Lanka. Now we are doing pretty well, and we started off with a bang. Actually, and Cairn Energy was an oil operator from Scotland, came down here, and they first negotiated with the government to explore some of the blocks in the Mannar region. Yeah, it's deep water. Mannar was a deep water region, so it was quite, at that time, it was in the early, I would say 2010. They started drilling. Well, before you drill and find oil, you got to first locate it. So they shot a lot of seismic. That is, seismic shooting is you shoot waves by firing special guns, and the waves. The sound of the gun goes down, comes back up, and it'll tell you whether it's going through rock or sand or oil or water. So after a seismic survey, they found that in the Mana Basin, in about 1,500 meters of water, there was deposits. And so Can Oil at that time started drilling. And it was expensive at that time because a drill ship in deep water was costing them roughly about $600,000 a day. That's a, and but after a few attempts, they struck first well called Dorado, and and that was, you're now drilling in 1,500 meters of water, and then you go further below to about another 2,000 meters until you hit the reservoir. Yeah. So that's so it started off well, and the potential was there. And it was mainly gas. So in geology terms, this area around the Mana Basin, going all the way up Kaveri, Krishna Godavari, and round to Bangladesh, it's all gas. On the west side of India is oil. So it's not everywhere you get gas, and you get mixture of both. Yeah. So we were all pretty buoyant about it, but then we had an oil crash 6 years after we started. Okay. The price of oil dropped way down. But at the same time, there was a change in government in Sri Lanka, so everything came to a halt. Yeah, and since I think in the last 5-6 years, nothing has happened regarding exploration of oil and gas in Sri Lanka. So that's it's a shame, but I understand now with the new regime and the new minister, he wants to really kickstart operations again soon, because Sri Lanka needs it. We import everything when energy is concerned.
We're too dependent.
Yeah, totally. And if he had continued without stopping, the gas that was coming out would have kept our energy going for 35 years. Yeah. So, but unfortunately, it didn't. So it's. I'm keen for this to start again, and I think fossil fuel will be here in West Babina, especially in Sri Lanka. Green energy, solar, wind, whatever waves will catch up. Yeah, but not in the immediate future. And currently the world situation is a big demand for oil. Yeah, a huge demand for fossil fuels because they didn't have the energy. So I don't want to get into the politics of the world politics, but energy is key to every country. Yeah.
Okay. So moving on, what are the changes you have maybe noticed in the oil and gas industry during your tenure? Like, what's the demand for it? Like, how does it work? What kind of changes from let's say?
The thing is, the biggest thing about it, a lot of people they have an idea, oh, we drill, next thing we have petrol coming out. No, it doesn't work that way. A process from a green field, if you start drilling in a deep water, it would take at least 8 to 12 years before you get a refined product out of the ground. That's how long it takes. You got to start in various phases. You got to shoot seismic waves. You got to study it. Then you pinpoint the wells, and in deep water you drill a well. One well will take about 60 days to drill. It may be dry, it may be good. So once you've done all that, and then once you find it, you bring it out. Then you're going to pipe it ashore so it's a huge. It takes about, I would say, 8 to 12 years. Now the big oil fields further north of Mana on Kaveri Basin, where Reliance, it took them 12 years before they bring the gas out. So it's a long process. So sometimes this length of this an oil and gas discovery, the time it takes to bring it out, doesn't quite fit with the economics. Yeah,
and the demand.
But you got to really commit yourself, and it's a lot of money. You're talking of $2-3 billion in today's money. So you need to find people. Now in Sri Lanka, the biggest problem is funding. Who will fund it? Yeah. So there are people who will fund it. I know people like ExxonMobil came here and they talked to us. Shell also came here and they talked to us. But all these private oil companies, the IOC, international, they are reluctant as long as politically the country is not stable. The NOCs, the national companies, like Petronas and ONGC, the ONGC were very keen to come in too. They are more, they could structure it government to government, yeah. Whereas the Exxons and the BPs, Equinors, they'll want a proper PRA, that's a production sharing agreement, yeah. Now the other stumbling block is where we got to have our regulatory bodies with some firm regulations on how the production sharing agreement will work. So see, eventually the power, we can bring gas or oil out of the ground and you convert it into what? In Sri Lanka it's power. Power is controlled by CEB. So they'll have to buy the power. So they control the price. Yeah. So I think the government now, I hope for the next round, there will be a proper regulatory body that will have a fixed purchase of what they call a PRA, a proper production sharing agreement, and stick to it. Yeah. So at the moment, a lot of companies, international oil companies, are worried. Can they have, before they can spend their billions investing it, they need some returns. Yeah. And the returns is, you can have some of the, they could have the returns possibly in 10 years, 15 years. But if you say you're not going to get anything back over 30 years, they won't be interested. Yeah, that's the other stumbling block. And now with OPEC, I saw one of the questions that came from the lady. They are cutting back on oil production. Why? Because they want to keep the prices up. Yeah, and who suffers? The countries like Sri Lanka, we got no energy at all. Yeah, so eventually, when there's a glut of oil nowadays, it's going to get worse with the Ukrainian now. Ukraine war going on. The gas over there, the whole entire Europe is gulping all the gas the world can produce. Yeah. In fact, LNG, LNG is liquefied natural gas. An American company was going to try and bring the gas out in the Mana Basin, convert it into LNG, but that they pulled out because of the Ukrainian war, because they're sending all their energy towards Germany at the moment. So unfortunately, politically also things have changed. But there's a wind of change here with this with the new administration now, and I've talked to various people here, like the DG Surato Vidagama and Salia Vikram Surya, who's also in the business. So they feel next year there could be back again. We will be back in business in exploring forward. But the biggest problem is the length. You see, you can't just drill and say you're going to pump petrol. It takes 8 to 12 years to start a green field. Yeah, it's a long time. And so in 8 to 12 years, you could have one government or two governments or whatever. In Sri Lanka, I don't know how many. So in that period of time. So that's why we should have some firm regulations. That doesn't matter who comes in, this is what you're going to do. That is being processed at the moment. And I spoke to the current Director General of Hydrocarbon. He's saying it's all in the pipeline and it has to have cabinet approval, blah, 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 whatever the system takes. But if that path is cleared, then we have, and also the technology has moved forward. Now we can drill in very deep water without too much hassle, whereas Sri Lankan gas is quite clean, so it'll be easy to produce. So with all those pluses, I hope the new administration will now give us a take and CEB also would have to change their policies to accommodate our own gas as opposed to buying diesel or petrol or nothing. Totally reliant on outsiders.
So our next segment is Deep Dive, and this segment basically aims to provide our viewers with information with precision, a little more on the technical side of what people want to know about. So I think we've spoken a little bit about how feasible it is oil exploration in Sri Lanka. Do you want to expand a little bit more about, and now we've understood the timeline it basically takes to do it.
Yeah.
Any other factors that make it a little more feasible? Or
Yeah, because once I think the first phase of any exploration is the seismic. The seismic that'll tell us exactly. Now it has. In the early days, during when I first started, there was only seismic 1. That was you go and shoot these, we call them bombs down, it sends waves down the line, and the waves come and tell. And there are geophysics and geologists who can read it. But now we get seismic 1, 2, 3, 3D, really sophisticated, so they can pinpoint exactly where the hydrocarbon is. Yeah. And there are now loads of techniques. Those days you just drill straight down and you bring up whatever you hit. But now you get different types of drilling technology. You get the thing called anaconda that you can drill, and then the drill string can move around and pick up the various places. So this is only offshore oil, yeah. And then now there is also onshore fracking. That is, you must have read in the papers, the UK are just given the go-ahead to frack, because all the environmentalists are all up in arms. This can have detrimental effects. 2 things. First thing, it can get into your water table, and of course the second thing is they say it causes earthquakes, which I don't believe. Yeah, so it's these are all estimated figures.
okay. I think we spoke about why it stopped now. Moving on, in the current scenario of OPEC Plus cutting oil production, can you just explain a little bit about how OPEC operates? Do you have experience in how they operate?
I have not got into that level in the industry, but OPEC is a controlling body who can control with the major Saudi and all that. But they can control the prices, by the demand. Unfortunately, the Asia Pacific arena, we don't have that much clout. It's mostly the Western nations. They can control what they can produce or not produce here. And Saudi, which is the major, they can turn off the taps and we'll be in trouble.
Yeah.
And they in order to keep the prices up, they will keep they'll curtail the production. We don't want a glut of oil, but now or gas. Yeah. At the moment, there's a big demand for gas in the whole of Europe because of Russia had turned off their taps. Yeah. So that's an area which had all the country now. Sri Lanka has hardly any say in this matter because we don't produce any. But other producing nations like US will be, they are not happy with OPEC because OPEC is put a ceiling on their prices.
And we do buy a lot of oil from Saudi also. So
yeah, but I think eventually, they will talk. OPEC can't just control it. Eventually, they'll have to give up. But right now, because of the war in Ukraine and the gas cutting off of Russia is causing a major effect on the gas supplies.
How do you think Sri Lanka is going to mitigate this price volatility?
You mean of the
Yes, from the OPEC cutting.
I don't think we have any say in the matter because we are such a small nation. Yeah. I don't think we have, even India wouldn't have much of a say in this matter because they all require energy. And we could buy from the wrong people, like Iran. There are people who can, but then there are other repercussions if you do. So once we fix our regulatory system here, once we know what we want, and then CEB falls in line that they would buy the gas or oil that we produce here, then it'll start to move. Yeah. Whereas big boys will have to decide what's best for them. Yeah.
What do you think some of the ideal policies for the oil and gas industry that need to be implemented that businesses expect? What would Haley's, if there are there some ideal policies that y'all expect?
Yeah, to me, as from Haley's point of view, we are not an operator. We are only a service provider. Yeah. So operators are the Shells, the BP, ExxonMobil, and there's a whole host of others. They are the top five, and then the big boys around this area would be ONGC in India, Petronas in Malaysia, and some of the big boys in that region. Yeah, they are the, because they are governmental bodies, so they can have a say in the matter. Yeah, you got to have a firm policy. Yeah, production sharing agreement. And if they're going to bring $1 billion or billions of dollars to do some exploration, they'll need to have a policy. All right, now how do we handle that? Those things have to, in order to bring the finances in, we got to have that policy in place. So you have to have a production sharing agreement. It could be 60-40 or 70-30 at the beginning. And then as time goes on, as you're starting to produce more and more, that equation can change. Yeah.
So the production sharing agreement is something that we're missing out on.
Yeah,
rather.
some firm policy on how we do it. Yeah.
The oil and gas sector in Asia, it's mainly dominated by state-owned enterprises. Is the Sri Lankan state or government geared and equipped enough to see this energy crisis through?
They have talked about it quite some time. To form a what they call a NOC, a national oil company. Most of the countries have that around the Asia Pacific region. Like ONGC, that's an NOC. Petronas is an NOC. So there are talks behind the scenes about starting a NOC. And it should work. It should work, because every other country has an NOC. Yeah. So it's once that is then these regulatory things can all fall under their head. Yeah. So and they can, then the government energy can control it. At the moment, too many fingers are in the pie. Everyone wants to have a piece of the action. So I reckon an NOC, that Sri Lanka should have an NOC, a national oil company.
And we haven't had one so far because
we don't have the expertise or the money. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Just the last question. We did speak about some foreign oil companies, but after your conversations and your interactions with them, do you see an appetite from foreign oil companies to enter the Sri Lankan market?
I have in my years, I have talked with some of the big boys. They're all keen to come to Sri Lanka. And because they have seen some of the seismic data, and in fact, when was it? Not very long ago, Exxon people had come here. I was in UK at that time. So yes, they have, provided they can have the return. They won't pour their money in, provided they need to get some return back. And the stumbling block here was we could never get the government to, for them oil and gas wasn't number one. Yeah, for them it was too long for a start, and it was quite easy to buy diesel by the tanker load on the phone. Yeah, so that's the easy way out, I think. Yeah, so I think we should form this regulatory body and drill for it and pour the money into it, and the returns if we get.
Do you think in terms of coming to policies, you obviously need a push from a few companies and you need to push the government a little bit? Do you think things like conferences are going to help do that, or how?
Yes, I think so. In the very early days, we had some big conferences here.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember speaking on one of those sessions, and we had invited a lot of guests from the Asia Rim. They were all here at that time, and they gave a good ear to everything. But then I think timing also was wrong. I think we got right now. I don't think anyone has the appetite to come here. Yeah, so due to the current situation, but things settle down, and if they organize another symposium or whatever it is, they have now there has an OTC in Malaysia, where Petronas sponsors it. So, and I think Sri Lanka also can do that. We did it once. Yeah. And there was a lot of people who came in for those that symposium we had. Yeah, I think we should do that again, really. And I haven't met the new energy minister, Mr. Kanchana. I understand he's young, he's vibrant. I think there should be much more lobbying at his level. In fact, I did talk to the chairman of Hale, he's Mr. Panditage, and he's very keen to move it forward. He was always keen. But problem, we never had a stable Mr. Oil and Gas. Everyone comes to changes, constant changing. So if you have someone there permanently and can see these things through, and once the regulator with all the regulations are there, they couldn't change that. It doesn't matter who comes and goes. At least then we have a Bible to go on. We don't have that Bible right now. But today, when I spoke to the DG, he was saying me the Bible is now ready for approval. Yeah, but they can't get the cabinet to sit down and look at it. Yeah.
So that's the NOC that we're looking at.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for an insightful conversation and joining us as our first guest on Biznomics Studio.
Okay. Thank you very much for hearing me out. And I'm not a financier, I'm an operator, operations guy. Yeah.